There is something deeply suspicious about money. We spend our lives chasing little rectangles, metal discs, and invisible numbers stored in computers. Yet none of those things can feed you, warm you, or stop a wolf from reconsidering your place in the food chain. Ancient humans had the same basic problems we do. They needed food, tools, shelter, allies, and occasionally someone willing to help after a very questionable hunting decision. But they had no coins, no banknotes, no credit cards, and absolutely no customer support. So what did they trade? The obvious answer is barter. 1 spear for 3 fish, 2 hides for a basket of berries. But the real story is stranger. Prehistoric exchange was not just about objects. Humans traded favors, access, protection, marriage ties, information, status, and promises. Before money, wealth lived inside relationships, and everyone was keeping score. A chimpanzee can exchange favors. It may groom another chimp today and expect support during an argument tomorrow, which is basically office politics with more screaming. Ravens remember who treated them fairly. Vampire bats share blood with hungry companions and keep track of who returns the favor. Nature invented reciprocity long before anyone invented a receipt. But human exchange became unusually powerful because our ancestors combined reciprocity with language, long-term memory, social reputation, and the ability to imagine future obligations. A trade does not always mean you give me meat and I give you a stone right now. It can mean you helped my family during winter, so when your daughter needs shelter 3 years from now, my camp will remember. That is not simple barter, that is credit, and the bank is everyone's memory. For this system to work, early humans needed brains capable of tracking relationships across large social networks. They had to remember who shared food, who refused, who exaggerated the size of the animal they supposedly killed, and who mysteriously arrived only after the dangerous part was over. Reputation became a kind of invisible wealth. A generous hunter might gain allies, mating opportunities, protection, and influence, even if he gave away more meat than he personally consumed. Large animal carcasses are difficult to store without refrigeration. Sharing converted perishable food into durable social credit. Technology also created reasons to exchange. Not every person had equal access to high-quality stone, pigments, shells, medicinal plants, animal hides, or particular crafting skills. One group might live near excellent flint. Another might control a river crossing. Someone else might know how to make sharper blades, stronger cordage, or clothing that did not fall apart during the first mildly ambitious sprint. Specialization made cooperation profitable. Language then allowed humans to negotiate more than quantities. They could discuss quality, origin, ownership, obligation, and timing. They could also gossip, which may sound trivial until you realize gossip is an early fraud detection system. A dishonest trader could fool one person. Fooling an entire network was harder once everyone began discussing your business practices beside the fire. The real prerequisite for trade was not a market stall or a pile of surplus goods. It was trust supported by social surveillance. Once that existed, almost anything could become valuable, especially things nobody nearby could easily obtain. The first trade probably did not begin with 2 strangers politely comparing exchange rates. It probably began with curiosity. One group encountered another group carrying something unfamiliar. A black volcanic stone sharper than local flint, a shell from a distant coast, a red pigment with an unusually rich color. The object itself mattered, but so did the mystery attached to it. Where did that come from? That question may have been the first advertisement. Early exchanges were likely improvised and socially cautious. Meeting unfamiliar people could bring useful information, new allies, and rare materials. It could also bring theft, violence, or a sudden demonstration of why everyone was carrying spears. Food was probably one of the easiest ways to begin. Sharing a meal showed that visitors were not immediate enemies and created a temporary obligation. A gift might be offered without an explicit demand for payment, but that did not mean it was free. We have opened a relationship. Eventually, you should respond. Prehistoric people probably did not stand around calculating whether one polished stone axe equaled exactly 9 kilograms of dried meat. Value depended on circumstances. A cutting tool was worth more to someone who had broken theirs. Water was worth more during drought. A strange shell might be useless for dinner, but extremely useful for proving that you had powerful connections. Information could be more valuable than any object. Groups may have exchanged knowledge about migrating animals, edible plants, dangerous territories, water sources, seasonal weather, or the movements of rival communities. People themselves also connected exchange networks. Marriage between groups could create alliances, reduce conflict, and open access to distant resources. Skilled individuals may have traveled between communities, bringing techniques for shaping stone, sewing hides, making baskets, preparing medicines, or conducting rituals. What moved across the landscape was not just property, it was expertise. And many goods probably changed hands repeatedly. A shell collected on a coast might be gifted inland, exchanged again during a seasonal gathering, carried through a marriage alliance, and eventually buried hundreds of miles away with someone who had never seen the ocean. Roots formed, expectations developed, certain places became regular gathering points. And, fortunately for archaeologists, one of the most popular materials left behind an almost perfect geological signature: obsidian. Obsidian is what happens when volcanic lava cools so quickly that crystals do not have time to form. The result is a glossy natural glass that can fracture into edges sharper than many modern steel blades. Different volcanic sources contain distinct combinations of trace elements. By analyzing an artifact's chemical composition, researchers can often match it to the geological location where the stone originally formed. Obsidian comes with a return address. At prehistoric sites across the Near East, Anatolia, the Mediterranean, East Africa, the Americas, and the Pacific, archaeologists have found obsidian tools far from the volcanoes that produced them. The amount of obsidian often decreases as distance from the source increases, suggesting that much of it passed through multiple communities. Distribution patterns reveal not only movement, but choices about who received what in what form, and perhaps under whose authority. Marine shells appear far inland, sometimes drilled into beads or sewn onto clothing. Attractive stones moved beyond their natural geological zones. Amber, pigments, animal teeth, and high-quality flint crossed regions. People were not exchanging only what they needed to survive. A shell necklace could communicate identity, adulthood, ancestry, spiritual protection, or membership in a distant alliance. An exotic stone might prove that its owner had traveled, hosted visitors, or maintained relationships with people beyond the horizon. The archaeological evidence confirms movement, but it does not preserve the conversation that caused it. We can identify where a piece of volcanic glass began and where it ended. We cannot always tell whether it was purchased, gifted, inherited, stolen. A blade survives for 10,000 years. A promise does not. When we ask whether prehistoric humans used barter, gift exchange, credit, tribute, or something else entirely, the honest answer is often probably several of them, depending on the situation. But barter has a famous weakness. Both people must want what the other offers at roughly the same moment. Economists call this the double coincidence of wants. Small communities could solve this problem through delayed reciprocity. Instead of demanding immediate payment, people gave resources with the expectation that support would return later. Nobody calculated interest, but everyone remembered who behaved like a decent person. Anthropologists often describe this as a gift economy, though the word gift can be misleading. A gift may look generous while still creating obligation. Refusing to return generosity could damage a person's reputation, reduce future support, or turn the next community feast into an extremely tense seating arrangement. Redistribution is another possibility. A successful hunter, respected elder, ritual specialist, or emerging leader might collect resources and distribute them among the group. This could reduce risk and strengthen unity. It could also strengthen the distributor, because the person controlling the feast eventually begins to look suspiciously like management. Was that shell a payment? A wedding gift? A peace offering? A sacred object? A debt finally repaid after 20 years? The answer may have changed every time the object changed hands. Prehistoric economies were not primitive versions of modern supermarkets. They were tangled systems of kinship, obligation, generosity, competition, and memory. And once people learned that giving could create loyalty, exchange became more than survival. It became power. A person who organized a feast, distributed meat, provided rare ornaments, or helped others during shortages could accumulate followers and obligations. Generosity became a public performance, and the audience remembered. Seasonal gatherings brought scattered groups together to share food, arrange marriages, renew alliances, settle disputes, and exchange materials from distant regions. These events were part market, part family reunion, part diplomatic summit. Goods were buried with the dead, placed in graves, deposited in caves, thrown into rivers, or offered at sacred places. Ritual exchange helped communities express loyalty to gods, ancestors, territories, and collective identities. In parts of the ancient Near East, clay tokens and later written accounting systems helped institutions manage these flows. Long before coined money became common, the transaction was no longer held only in human memory. It could be stored outside the brain. That changed everything. Money did not appear because ancient peoples suddenly became tired of trading goats. It emerged because human relationships were getting too large, too complex, and too mobile for everyone to personally remember every promise. But money never truly replaced the older system. It covered it. Modern economies still depend on trust, reputation, reciprocity, and shared belief. A banknote works because other people agree to accept it. Before money, ancient humans traded meat, tools, pigments, shells, stone, labor, knowledge, protection, marriage, alliances. Yet beneath all those things, they were trading something more fundamental. Confidence that another person would remember the relationship tomorrow. That may be humanity's oldest currency.